I used to believe my childhood smelled like bread and old books. It's the scent that floats through every memory of our narrow yellow house on Linden Street. Loaves cooling on the kitchen sill, pages turning in my father's study while my mother hummed hymns a room away. On Sundays, neighbors praised our picture-perfect composure. Dad, the gentle school librarian with spectacles forever sliding down his nose. Mom, the piano teacher whose laugh tinkled through open windows. And me, quiet, obedient, forever sandwiched between their clasped hands during church. People said we were blessed. Yet in whispers I wasn't meant to hear, Mom corrected them. Protected. She said the word the way people say plague. Soft, as if sound alone might wake something sleeping in the walls. When I asked why she locked the attic after dusk or sprinkled salt beneath my bedroom door, she only pressed a hot palm to my cheek and murmured, "Some children are chosen for light, others for shadows, and shadows cling." I tried to laugh it off at school, telling friends my parents were old country superstitious. But a sliver of her dread lodged beneath my rib cage and fluttered whenever the house creaked after midnight. Despite the omen-drunk rituals, our life looked idyllic. Dad brought home battered first editions, teaching me to trace sentences like Braille so stories felt alive under my fingertips. Mom choreographed dinner time like a waltz. Mashed potatoes spun into porcelain bowls, roast chicken landing perfectly at center stage. I earned straight A's, collected pressed flowers between encyclopedia pages, and convinced myself that fear was just another heirloom. Odd, but harmless. Only my Aunt Lydia ever pierced the illusion. During her rare visits, she'd stare at me too long, lips thinned, as if searching for a bruise no one else could see. She'd speak to my parents in hushed check, syllables sharp enough to cut. Afterward, Dad would polish his glasses until the lenses squeaked while Mom scrubbed dishes already clean. I learned not to ask questions. Everything shifted on my 16th birthday. The party had ended. Balloons sagged over a half-eaten cake, and twilight soaked the living room in violet. Sent upstairs for candles, I rummaged through Dad's desk and found a cedar box I'd never seen before. Latched, but not locked. Inside lay a stack of letters, their edges soft with handling. All were addressed in the same looping hand, to Samuel Ellis regarding your son. My father's name is Thomas. My breath caught on that single contradiction, the first hairline crack in a portrait frame life. Downstairs, Mom called my name, sugar sweet, but the walls suddenly felt too close. As I slipped the top letter into my pocket, a thought as cold as winter rain struck me. Perhaps the curse wasn't something lurking outside our door. Perhaps it was a secret already pulsing inside our veins, sealed in ink long before I was born. I waited until the house slept, until Dad's heavy door hinge sighs and Mom's faint nocturnal hymns melted into the hush, before I unfolded the letter I'd pocketed. Candlelight quivered over the ink like a nervous confession. Dear Samuel, they tell me I cannot write you again. But a father's heart is an untrained animal. A father's heart. Mine raced, stumbling over a name I had never worn on my tongue. Samuel Ellis. Letter after letter dated every birthday of my life lay within the cedar box, each a plea to meet our son. The earliest bled with new parent wonder. The later ones, with grief and begging. Does he still love music? Please at least let him know I exist. Between the pages fluttered ticket stubs, photographs. A man with my exact charcoal dark eyes holding out a model sailboat, as though offering it to the lens, and to me. I felt the floorboards tilt. The attic salt lines, the whispered word cursed. All at once they tasted of guilt, not protection. At dawn I staggered into the kitchen clutching an armful of letters, throat raw from night-long silence. Mom, why are there letters from someone who has my eyes? My voice cracked like an adolescent still chasing puberty. She froze, dish towel dripping water onto tile. Dad entered, glasses off, his gaze naked, frightened. We told you never to open that box, he said, as if that alone explained the betrayal. Who is Samuel Ellis? Mom's shoulders caved. A mistake. My mistake, Dad added, palms splaying over his heart in a saintly gesture that suddenly felt theatrical. We promised God to shield you from his sins. I laughed. A brittle sound that made them flinch. So you cursed me to hide him? Their version poured out like spoiled milk. Samuel Ellis, Dad's college roommate, had fathered me during some dizzy weekend romance with Mom before she met Thomas. According to them, Samuel spiraled into darkness. Gambling, violence, rumors of occult debts. When Mom discovered the pregnancy, Thomas pledged to raise me as his own if they severed every tie. The talk of curses, salt lines, and attic locks was a convenient myth designed to frighten me from digging. I expected rage. Instead, shock hollowed me. Every bedtime story, every piano lesson, every whispered, "I love you," suddenly glittered with counterfeit shine. "Give me the letters," Dad demanded, voice no longer gentle. No, my fingers whitened. What happened next fractured the day like glass. Dad lunged. Letters scattered in an ink paper shower. Mom snatched a handful and thrust them into the breakfast flames. I dove, burning my wrist, rescuing only one photograph before heat curled the rest to ash. Smoke alarms wailed, neighbors gathered, and the town's illusion of our sanctity shattered alongside mine. Aunt Lydia burst in, screaming check accusations. "How dare you lie to him?" Over her shoulder I saw the pastor from our church, summoned by my parents. He clasped my elbow with holy sternness and hissed, "Evil spirits twist the truth, child. Repent." By nightfall rumors galloped faster than reason. At school corridors parted like the Red Sea. Whispers formed a verdict. I was the bastard son of a murderer, bewitched enough to strike my own parents. The librarian, my second home, revoked my access, citing potential theft. The scholarship committee rescinded my application, pending verification of identity. I tried to pass the surviving photograph around like a courtroom exhibit, proof of an ordinary man with a crooked smile. No one looked. Even Aunt Lydia, fearful of becoming collateral, retreated. I was left clutching a scorched corner of my lineage, watching my parents' story calcify into gospel. For the first time in my life, I understood what true curses look like. Not ghosts or demons, but lies that everyone agrees to believe, except the one damned by them. A week after the kitchen flames, I walked through town like a ghost who could still bleed. Rumor became law overnight. Teachers reframed my straight-A record as cheating through occult persuasion. The pastor preached a Sunday sermon on wolves in filial clothing, and my parents, filed a police report claiming I'd assaulted them while possessed. I learned this when 2 officers escorted me from biology class, their latex-gloved hands light on my shoulders yet heavy enough to brand shame into bone. No charges stuck. There was no bruise that wasn't mine. But the school suspended me, pending psychiatric evaluation. My college scholarship evaporated the same afternoon. Home wasn't home. Dad nailed my bedroom door shut, citing boundary safety. Mom left boxes of my clothes on the porch with a note. "Seek deliverance first." I stared at the salt line once meant to protect me, now a white, mocking horizon I could never cross again. I slept 3 nights on Aunt Lydia's lumpy sofa until an anonymous call warned her that harboring the cursed boy risked church expulsion. She wept, handed me $60, and whispered that Prague had saints for hopeless causes. I didn't have airfare to the next county, let alone Europe. The unraveling gathered speed. My bank account froze after my parents disputed the custodial funds. The library revoked my volunteer badge. Even my favorite coffee shop refused to fill my mug. Health code, they said, eyes averted. Former friends texted Bible verses about demons masquerading as light. Days blurred into hunger and relentless winter drizzle. I pitched underpasses as though they were tents, learning which heating grates blew warmest after midnight. The photograph of Samuel, singed corner, crooked smile, lived in my breast pocket, the last ember against cold. Loneliness muttered vicious questions. What if they're right? What if darkness follows bloodlines? I kept replaying the night Mom met Samuel. Was I conceived in violence? Did his rumored sins pulse inside me, waiting to hatch? Each doubt gnawed another thread from sanity's seam. Violence finally found me beneath the railway bridge. 3 boys from youth groups spotted the devil's spawn, armed with righteous fury and baseball bats. They shattered my ribs like brittle promises, chanting scripture between swings. I didn't scream. The roar of the passing freight train swallowed every sound except bones cracking. When they left, I watched crimson drip to gravel and wondered whether letting the next locomotive erase me would be easier than enduring one more sunrise. But even at rock bottom, a stubborn pulse throbbed, something beyond fear or hope, maybe pure animal refusal to end on someone else's terms. I dragged myself to a free clinic, lied about the assault, and spent the night on a plastic chair, ribs taped tight, mind unraveling in slow-motion reels. By dawn I lay on a park bench, breath frosting the air, body convulsing with fever. The photograph slipped from my pocket and landed face up on the concrete. Samuel's eyes meeting mine as though asking, "Is this the legacy you accept?" I closed my own and whispered, "I don't know." A pair of footsteps halted beside the bench, shadow eclipsing weak morning light. A stranger's voice, low, steady, cut through the ringing in my ears. "Easy there. I've got you." I woke with gravel pressed into my cheek and the scent of rain-soaked wool in my nose. A coat, thick military green, had been draped across my shoulders like a flag laid over a fallen soldier. When I tried to sit up, pain flared down my side. The world pinwheeled until a pair of warm hands steadied me. "Don't rush," the stranger said, voice rich as cello timbre. I blinked until his face resolved. Early 40s, copper skin, close cropped salt and pepper hair, eyes the color of Winter Creek water, clear, cold, honest. He crouched, one knee in the slush, as though kneeling at an altar. "My name's Dr. Victor Annaba. You're going to the hospital, all right?" The word hospital tasted of antiseptic halls and pitying stares. I shook my head, breath hitching. "No insurance." He frowned. "Then you come with me." No grand vow, no pity-slick sermon, just simple grammar threaded with certainty. Victor was a trauma surgeon who'd burned out after losing a patient, a child, under fluorescent ER glare. He now ran a storefront clinic funded by an eccentric widow's bequest. In the van ride there, I hovered at the rim of consciousness, half listening as he hummed Mahler under his breath. Later I'd learn the melody was once his daughter's lullaby. She died at 6 from a congenital heart defect, the grief that chased him out of traditional medicine and into the margins where the broken slept. At the clinic, he reset my cracked ribs, stitched a gash, and photographed bruises for evidence. "Someday you'll want proof you survived." I flinched when he reached for my pocket, expecting confiscation. Instead, he slipped Samuel's scorched photograph into a sterile specimen sleeve, treating it with the same care he'd given my bones. "Artifacts matter," he said. "They remind us we're more than pain." Recovery wasn't cinematic. It was slow mornings of nausea and spiraling shame, afternoons of disinfectant sting, nights haunted by bat-swing echoes. Victor installed me in a spare loft above the clinic, a space that smelled of cedar shavings and stale coffee. Payment, he declared, would be work. Cataloging donated medical texts, mopping floors, translating intake forms for immigrant patients whose check reminded me of Lydia's sharp consonants. The clinic became a crucible where broken bodies and stories mingled. A former boxer with nerve damage taught me breathing exercises. A grandmother with chemo-rough laughter forced me to eat her homemade stew. Everyone carried wreckage. No one wielded it as a weapon. Victor set strict routines. Lights out by 10, 20-minute meditation at dawn, one session a week with a therapist named Rue, an ex-monk who swore with poetic flair. Rue asked me to list lies I'd swallowed as truths. We pinned each to the corkboard. "I am cursed. I destroy what I love. I am alone." Every time I walked by, I stabbed another thumbtack through the paper, anchoring the falsehood in place so it couldn't drift back inside me. Weeks stretched into months. My ribs knit, so did something softer. I enrolled in night classes taught in a church basement, earning certificates in archival science. Ironic, perhaps, to pursue the preservation of fragile documents after watching my own history burn. Some evenings Victor and I traded quiet companionship over instant coffee, listening to rain tap the skylight. He never pried, yet his silence invited honesty more than any interrogation. One February dusk, As snow-stitched silver seams between rooftops, I found myself laughing, really laughing, over a crooked drawing a pediatric patient gifted me. The sound startled me so much I almost dropped the paper. Victor looked up from his charts. "That's the first time," he said softly. "I've heard your ribs expand without pain." In that moment I realized the curse had never been blood or letters. It was the belief I didn't deserve rescue. And here, under flickering fluorescent halo, a man broken by his own ghosts had offered not salvation but solidarity. I wasn't healed, not yet, but I was housed, fed, believed. Somewhere between rooftop snow and paper ghosts, I began to imagine a future written in my own hand. 2 winters blurred into each other before I noticed the absence of dread in my mornings. By then the clinic loft had become something approximating home. A second-hand record player humming Nina Simone, stacks of annotated folios beneath the skylight, and a ficus I kept alive against all horticultural odds. Nights I studied for my archival science degree. Days I curated a storage room in the City Museum, coaxing brittle manuscripts back to legibility. The irony was delicious, salvaging histories for a salary. Victor remained my anchor, but our dynamic shifted. Less savior and patient, more stubborn siblings prodding each other toward wholeness. On Thursdays we shared takeout and chess. On Fridays I helped him catalog medical supplies while he pretended not to watch me smile at Lucia, the museum's conservation chemist. Lucia laughed with her whole body, shoulders first, eyes last, and spoke 4 languages, all of them gentler than rumors. The first time she traced the scar along my ribs, she called it evidence of flight, as if broken bones were just wings in disguise. I'd begun drafting a legal petition to reclaim my birth name. Samuel Ellis's surname felt like a lighthouse calling me toward uncharted coasts. When the past arrived in an envelope thick with embossed gilt, J. Harrison and Company, Probate Division. Inside, a letter informing me that Samuel Ellis had died 9 months earlier of heart failure, leaving a small inheritance. Nothing grand, a rural cottage and modest investment account. To my son, provided paternity be proven. A single sheet of stationery accompanied it, Samuel's handwriting unmistakable even after the flames. "If this finds you, know I looked for you every birthday." I read it until tears blurred ink into river deltas. The paternity test required a documented chain of custody, which meant returning to the very town that had exiled me. Victor offered to drive. Lucia pressed a sealed thermos of herbal courage into my hands. I rehearsed speeches about closure, forgiveness, boundaries. None survived the collision with reality, because waiting on the courthouse steps, pale beneath harsh noon sun, were my parents. Dad's cardigan hung loose on shoulders that seemed to have shrunk. Mom's hair, once raven black, was threaded with storm cloud gray. They looked smaller than the memory of their rage. Mom spoke first, voice freighted with rehearsed contrition. "Thomas's kidneys are failing," she said, gesturing toward Dad's swollen feet. "Dialysis costs what we cannot spare. Samuel's estate belongs to me," I finished, pulse drumming like war. Dad reached for my hand. I flinched, and the motion cleaved his composure. Tears pooled behind his bifocals. "We were wrong," he whispered, "but you are still our son." The courthouse door clicked open, clerk calling my name. In that suspended second the world split. The boy who once believed in curses, and the man deciding what to do with broken gods kneeling before him. I inhaled, tasting iron and possibility. "I'll pay for the test," I said evenly. "And I'll fund your treatment." Mom exhaled a sob of relief. "But on my terms. No more lies. No more salt lines. After today, we start over or we stay strangers." Their silence fluttered like a torn flag. I stepped past them into the marble foyer, the photograph of Samuel warm against my chest, Lucia's thermos catching light behind me, Victor's steady shadow at my side. Somewhere a clerk stamped papers, a judge signed forms, and the machinery of justice ground forward. Not as vengeance, but as acknowledgement that stories, once exhumed, deserve daylight. I emerged holding certified proof that blood could be both wound and bridge. My parents hovered, uncertain, at the curb. I paused, met their haunted eyes, and offered a nod. No forgiveness yet, but a door cracked open. Whether they'd walk through was no longer my burden. When the paternity results came back, 99.97%, glittering with statistical certainty, I felt nothing dramatic, just a quiet settling of tectonic plates that had always been misaligned. I signed the transfer papers for Samuel's cottage and wired the first dialysis payment for Dad the next morning. No grand reconciliation followed. Instead, brittle phone calls flickered between us. Mom describing medical updates in clinical tones, Dad thanking me. His voice dipped in equal parts shame and awe, always ending the same way. When you're ready, we'd like to see you. I wasn't ready, and I said so. I kept living. Lucia and I spent spring weekends repainting Samuel's cottage. Every brushstroke an act of dialogue with a father I'd never meet. We discovered boxes of his journals in the attic. Pages dense with astronomy sketches, questions he'd wanted to ask me, lullabies he'd intended to sing when we finally met. I cataloged them the way I would any fragile artifact. Gloves on, breath held, heart open. Reading his words, I realized grief can be retroactive. Mourning the childhood I might have had, the man who tried to reach me. Still, every entry was proof he'd never abandoned the idea of me, even when everyone else conspired to erase him. Therapy with Rue shifted from triage to architecture. We drafted new mantras, pinning them over the old lies. I am the author of my story. I can offer help without surrendering truth. Bloodlines are invitations, not shackles. Each week I removed one thumbtack from the falsehood list until the corkboard looked less like a battlefield, more like an empty stage awaiting fresh scenery. 6 months after the courthouse, I attended Dad's post-treatment checkup. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and possibility. We sat outside on a bench beneath an anemic maple. Conversation crawled weather, dialysis fatigue, my museum project. At last Dad whispered, "I don't expect forgiveness." "I know," I said. Silence followed, thick as honey. And then, because honesty had become my discipline, I added, "But I am open to something humbler, coexistence, maybe growth." His shoulders sagged with cautious relief. We watched a sparrow steal crusts from cafeteria trays. Small, ordinary grace. Back at the cottage that night, I lit a fire in the hearth Samuel built with his own hands. I placed the first journal on my lap and the scorched photograph beside it, edges still charred from the kitchen blaze. I realized forgiveness wasn't a single gate swung wide. It was an unlit path revealed inch by inch, each step illuminated only when I dared to take it. So I took another, and another. The weight of curses, lies, and lost time loosened like old knots in wet rope. By midnight I closed the final journal, pressed my palm to its cover, and spoke aloud, not to the dead or the living, but to the fractured selves I'd carried. I am cursed no longer. I am chosen for light, and the shadows now answer to me. The room answered with crackling embers and the steady heartbeat of rain on a new roof. Sounded, for the first time in my life, like home.
If you made it this far, you're officially part of the drama. Subscribe for more, and tell me in the comments, what would you have done?